Well, welcome back, everyone. Here we go. Episode, would you believe, 28, or episode 3 of series 2, whichever version you fancy. But to let you into a secret, we're going to be turning this into a book at some point. So we're just going to keep going until we get to about 50, and then we'll publish. And it will be an international bestseller, obviously. Right.
Yeah, a New York.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, international bestseller. And of course, the thing that's going to make it sell is chapters like this one. Are you ready? You know, I've even got herbal tea for this one because I know I'm going to just have to keep motivated. But actually, okay, here we go. Seriously, we talked about scaling the procurement function a couple of episodes ago. We have talked about scaling the finance function ages ago, but actually we're just going to come back, and although I of course I'm allowed to exhibit humor about my enthusiasm for talking about integrating finance processes, can't think of anything better. Actually, I'll let you into a secret. Delete insert finance for procurement or any other function. What we're going to talk about is just as relevant for them as it is for finance. But look, we're going to talk about finance because, why wouldn't I? I've got an expert sat talking to me in the form of Claire. So what are we going to focus on today? We're going to focus on, right, you're doing your merger and acquisition, you're bringing together different teams, different processes, different tech. We're going to focus on, right, how do you make that work? Because the whole point of doing any kind of combination is to, let's get them realize synergies and realize efficiencies and deliver better performance. And that normally goes for a ball of chalk. So let's just start at the basics. So look, Claire, here we are. We're two businesses. We've come together. You've got two finance teams, two sets of processes. Where do we focus our attention when it comes to integrating those processes? Where would you start?
Yeah. So when we do mergers and acquisitions, I think just one thing I'll point out before I answer your question is when we think about acquisitions, when we think about synergies, what is often the focus of attention is that we're looking to make some sort of cost-saving synergies. So we're wanting to avoid duplication of function and process and technology and everything through the operating model, where it's basically duplication and different ways of doing things. And certainly cost synergies can create a lot of value by generating economies of scale and one way of doing things. But the other point, and this leads a little bit on to my answer, is looking at revenue synergies as well. Right. So, in terms of customers and that you have and the acquired company have, what is the ability to cross-sell services into both your customer bases? Right. So when you're thinking about an integration, it's just important to think about both of those points, not just how can you streamline your costs and the way you deliver, but actually how can you get the most out of synergies across your customers and services. So, if we've got services that are attractive to both customer bases and complementary to each other, how are we enabling that? And then certainly from a finance point of view and being able to understand what is going on both across revenue and operating costs. The biggest key to that is good systems and good data, because without those two things, you're going to struggle to understand what's going on with both those areas of synergy. So seamless integration across finance processes for both those things is firstly across order to cash. So that's about, how do you go from initial inquiry about service or good to billing the customer and getting the cash in the door and all the information across that process. The second core process in your area of expertise is procure to pay. So how are you procuring goods? all the way through to receiving the goods, getting the invoice and paying for it. And the third core process is record to report. Now, record to report is your traditional accounting areas. So how are you accounting? So it's about your GLs, it's about your analysis of results, your management reporting. So everything that encompasses management accounting and financial accounting. So those three core processes: order to cash, procure to pay, record to report. Those are your key finance processes, and you've got to understand that when these two companies together, what are those processes going to look like? And this links very much into, as we mentioned before on the procurement coffee break, what is your vision? But pre-acquisition. How does that link to your value proposition? Because when you put like a business case together to acquire another company, you've got to have something called a value proposition, which is basically like a business case of how you're going to get better return on your investment by being a group rather than two standalone companies. And then when you think about your operating model, what does that mean for the technology you're going to use, the business process you're going to follow, and all the things we touched upon that previous coffee break on procurement is basically relevant to finance or indeed HR or IT or any other function. Right. So getting a bit of a weird feedback. So basically focus on your operating model, the key processes, how the two companies are going to come together. So back to you, Richard. Have you got any reflections or questions on that?
No, I'm going to fire it straight back to you, actually. Right. So look, because you've done this many, many more times than I have. And for me, this is a bit like an ERP implementation. You plan a year and it takes 7. So in your experience, integration is a complex thing. We talked about change management and all the things that could get in the way. But what can companies actually do to speed up the integration process so it doesn't get bogged down and you lose the benefit just because it's taken you so long to do it? I mean, practically, what have you seen work to enable people to execute quicker?
Yeah, so I think when you've got the two companies come together, I think you mentioned it in one of the previous coffee breaks. The first thing to know in place is what is your team going to look like to execute whatever plan you have in place. Because if you haven't got the right people in place, then you're not going to go very far. So the first point is prior to acquisition, know what your team's going to look like. The second point is when you're making an acquisition, make sure you've got the right level of due diligence when making the acquisition, so you know what's under the hood of the company that you're acquiring. You're not going to be able to integrate quickly if what you get is a complete surprise to you, right? So if whilst you may have done due diligence on the annual accounts, if you haven't done due diligence on the finance operations, so you know what is the skill set of this company, what kind of systems are they using for accounting? Is it largely manual or have they got automation in place? If that is an unknown, then when it's kind of the acquisition is kind of lobbed over the fence, as it were, to finance, it's going to take them some time to discover that. So it's much better to know that in advance. The third point is have a predefined integration playbook, and we mentioned that before when we was talking about procurement. Have a procurement integration playbook. That it's the same for any function across an organisation. You should have a definition of what your operating model is, and how that needs to be flexed when you're acquiring a company. And that should be linked to your integration playbook, which basically says, we're acquiring X company. We know, for example, that company, you mentioned DRP. Let's say they've got an old legacy version of JD Edwards or whatever system they're using, and no, they're not going to continue using that. We're going to bring them onto our global Oracle platform instead. So we've decided we've ticked off the sort of technology layer, and we've also ascertained through our due diligence that will be a good fit for them because their processes and requirements are broadly similar to ours. So that integration playbook is about sort of looking back through all the layers of the operating model and having a plan for it, and in my opinion, not skimping on the due diligence in advance, because if you do that, then you could have some surprises and possibly, I've seen this recently in the news with Ericsson. Actually, they made an acquisition, I think about a year ago. I've forgotten the name of it. It starts with a V. Anyway, the whole point is that a year on, and they've written down they've impaired the goodwill on that acquisition by 50%. I don't know all the details, but some of that will be down to what they thought they were getting wasn't quite what they were getting. So there is a financial cost to being surprised, and that can not just be in the form of it takes longer to actually integrate, and therefore you're not going to get value out of the acquisition as quickly, but it also can be more immediately in that you paid a price for that acquisition, you assumed there was so much goodwill, and that was an intangible, but actually when you realized what was going on, you wrote that down quite quickly, and that hit your P&L. So those are some tips for speeding up integration. And just I know, Richard, like you mainly focus on the procurement side, but I know you've seen both from a procurement and a finance point of view, both when companies have been integrated well and when they have not been integrated well. So what would you say the main benefits are from your point of view of good finance integration?
Do you know what? I'm actually going to digress before I answer. So, as I often bore you about, I spent a long time as an army officer. And, one of the things that we do regularly in, military terms is we do a thing called, we form battle groups. And a battle group basically means that I will go and grab different combat units and I will bring them together to form a battle group for a particular mission. And then I will disband it at the end of that mission. So, for example, I might get 2 squadrons of tanks, a squadron of engineers, some artillery, helicopter, some infantry. The next mission, it might be just infantry and aviation. And one of the things the military spends a long time on doing is making sure that everybody, doesn't matter what your cat badge or unit is, understands a common set of operatings. So language, radio, planning terminology, but then they still train to bring people together. And even though they've done all of that commonality, still you will not find a battle group commander who does not want some time to get people together to iron out any kinks. So with that vision, integrating teams, and we're talking about finance, but it could be any team, that's exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to bring together people who, in theory, I mean, particularly finance, you'd have thought all of them are reporting against IFRS. All of them have the same language in terms of that. But you and I both know that's just not true, because they'll have a different operating model, they'll have different technology, they'll have different priorities. So you're bringing together those 2 teams to form, if you like, the finance battle group for the next stage of that bigger company's operation, but you're not benefiting from any kind of commonality of language or training. So you've actually got 2 things to fix. You've got to bring people onto a common understanding, which is what we talked about, a couple of sessions ago. And then you've got to make them operate. But if you do get them operating together, and if we just focus on finance, I mean, the benefits are huge. Common way of operating means efficiency, improved ability to manage cash. And we talked about treasury management, in the last series. But again, common approaches mean your ability to manage cash and realize simpler processes for doing it comes straight away. The way that you report and that you track and establish financial controls, the way that you can do decision making and planning based on sound financial information at a larger scale, all of that comes from integrated functions. And as we were saying, look, if I could talk HR, I could talk procurement, exactly the same benefits happen if you get that integration right. Of course, the opposite applies. If you don't get the integration right, you are literally going to pour glue over both teams and probably end up with a worse performance than either of them had before the integration took place. Which just brings us full circle to that, what we talked about in scaling the procurement function and scaling the finance function: vision, common purpose, focus on the team so they know what you're trying to achieve, then build that roadmap, that plan to implement the strategy of, right, we're going to integrate this, we're going to align on this technology, we're going to adopt this, we're going to ditch that. But it's always, that strategy is always there to deliver value. And in the case of finance, you might state that value in terms of better cash management, quicker, quicker order to pay, or whatever it is that you're trying to deliver. But you should be then measuring right from day one whether you're on track to achieve that. Because if you do, not only will you see if things aren't working, because you might need to change the way you're approaching it, but equally, and this comes back to what we were talking about, atomic performance. If you can see progress towards a goal, it doesn't half encourage anybody that's involved and your wider stakeholders, and give them confidence that what you're doing is working. And that little message that James came up with of celebrate the small wins and deliver on the small baby step targets, that change in habit, is just as applicable in this as well. So for me, huge benefits if you get it right, big problems if you don't. And you use the example of Ericsson. There are lots of failed examples that had nothing to do with really poor due diligence on the value of what you were acquiring, but actually the destruction of value because you just didn't do the integration properly, and you ended up not working. So there you go.
Actually, that's a very good point. Actually, I was recently working with a client, and one of the issues is they've been making acquisitions, but that whole, you've talked about the importance of the team and the vision, but what was happening there was that the people involved, the sort of M&A team, were a completely separate team, and finance weren't really involved in understanding what the acquisition was going to be. And then what would happen is they'd make an acquisition, and then it was kind of chucked over the fence to finance. The only problem with that was then they were dealing with finance directors and a finance team in this company, and they didn't really know what they've been told about the future vision and what finance would be like post acquisition. Whereas I was recently chatting with a lady from IBM, and IBM seemed, based on what I heard from her, seemed to have it down very slick in that they're trying to establish what the vision is for the combined entity pre-deal, and finance are involved in that. So if the case is that you're making acquisition, but actually post acquisition you want to put their let's say their order to cash and procure to pay functions in a shared service center that you already set up, and make that clear pre-acquisition, rather than you made the acquisition. They think they're going to continue on as they've always have done, and then it's a huge surprise because the outcome of that huge surprise and effectively a massive culture shock on this other client I was telling you about was that actually they ended up having most of their finance team just walk out and leave, which goes to the point you're saying about, you just destroyed value because in that instance you didn't have well documented processes. So then in fact basically when the finance team left, not only have you lost them, but actually a lot of the knowledge in finance has just walked out the door because the processes were undocumented.
My world famous analogies, right? Imagine that how much easier it would be to build a bit of IKEA furniture if instead of them designing it and giving you the world's worst instructions on a piece of paper, actually they're very good instructions, it's just I'm male and I can't follow them. But imagine if instead of them designing it and giving you the instruction book, one of the designers helps you to build it. And it's exactly the same in M&A and planning. That it amazes me how many times you form, this secret squirrel M&A group, and it's got representation, all the functions are all there making sure it's going to work. Why don't they then take whoever the procurement person was in the M&A group, if there was one, and then get them to drive the transformation of procurement? And exactly the same in every other function, because they've got a clear view of what you're trying to achieve, and they understand the background and they understand why, and they're committed to it. And secondly, you don't waste time and losing stuff in translation when you've got this equivalent of an IKEA instruction set coming out. So I'm a absolute firm believer that if you want something to succeed, make sure the people that are planning it are also the people that are involved in leading and delivering it, because then you're giving yourself the maximum chance to understand the why. And off you go. Right.
I think that's a brilliant point, Richard, actually, about the fact that it is often in companies like a little secret squirrel team, the M&A team, and why not have key leaders in that M&A team from the respective back office functions, HR, procurement, finance, so who then post acquisition lead that transformation that's needed. I think that's a great point.
Right, and look, just to bring it to close it off, if I go back to that military analogy of a battle group, you would simply never ever plan an operation without involving the people who are going to lead it in that planning process, because you want the benefit of their thinking. And if you're going to do something complex, the last thing you want is someone who's got no clue leading a really important part of that operation with none of the context. So absolutely use the people that are going to lead the change to develop the change. And of course, give them help with consultancy, but they've got to be involved in it so that when it comes to doing it, they are completely able to do so. Right.
And just on that point on IKEA, by the way, and it can even be like I recently bought a new printer. Well, I really wish these and I had to sort of put bits of it together to assemble it. Right. But what I really wish they do is they give you like a instruction. But what I would really like is for anything where I have to do some self-assembly at home, like a QR code that I can just scan and then watch a video of the designer putting it together, and I can just follow it step by step.
Great idea. And the alternative is, and I'm an Android person. I don't use Apple. However, my partner uses Apple, and I can't but fail to admit how impressed I am that actually, if you're in the Apple ecosystem, setting up an Apple device is the easiest thing you could ever. I mean, literally switch it on, point it at something else, and voila, it all happens. And wouldn't it be lovely if business integrations were as simple to do? That, you know, that easy to use instruction manual. But there we go.
Yeah,
Right.
just
Okay.
the acquisition of Wi-Fi and it will magically happen.
Absolutely. And look, on the basis, as you know, right now I've got my laptop balanced on some books to get it to the right height with a borrowed webcam, because talking about, I wish I had a QR code to tell me what to do. My other computer's completely given up the ghost, even though they're literally 6 inches apart. One tells me there is no Wi-Fi and the other one's working fine. So there we go. Best laid plans. Right. How do we summarize? Do you know what? Super simple. Processes deliver value, but your business has got core processes. So focus on those, not all the little bits and pieces that just happen in the background. Focus on the big ticket things. If you want to do it faster, design it, deliver it, automate it, make sure the people that are doing it understand what you're trying to achieve, and always keep it in the context of the value that you're trying to deliver. Because if you do that, in any function where you're bringing processes together, if you focus on the big ticket processes and on the way that you go about doing it, you're going to drive the value that that integration was supposed to do. And, you know, you could use any language in finance, it's cash controls, visibility, decision making. In any other function, you'll have your same headline outcomes, which is what the processes drive. So therefore, measure your progress towards it and celebrate success. Do it in a small step fashion and you're going to get there. So there we go. I survived and I only drank half my tea. So remarkably, as always, it turned into an interesting chat. And I've got no idea what we're going to talk about. I don't know if you've got any idea what we're going to talk about.
No.
Okay, we'll make
I'm
it
sure
up. But
some interesting topics will come to us.
exactly. And look, this is your chance. Our lovely viewers who tell us in secret but won't click like, come on, give us a like. More importantly, just drop us a note. You can put it in a comment, or you can drop us an email, or however you want to do it. Find us on LinkedIn. If there are topics that you want us to talk about for that bit of free consultancy and some ideas, just tell us. And look, we would be delighted to pick up on that. But for now, from myself and Claire, have a great rest of the day and enjoy your coffee. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.